Behind the bright lights and perfect illusions, there's a cold, sterile truth. Some legends don't fall on stage, they fall on operating tables. In silence and steel, they take their last breath when they least expect it. This is the story of 16 famous actors who died during surgery. Bill Paxton, the heart that couldn't be saved, February 25, 2017. Hollywood woke up to heartbreak. Bill Paxton, the man who faced tornadoes in Twister, vampires in Near Dark, and alien queens in Aliens, was gone. Just 11 days earlier, he'd undergone surgery to replace a heart valve and repair an aortic aneurysm. The procedure was supposed to give him time to make more movies, time to watch his kids grow. But fate had other plans. In the days after surgery, tiny blood clots started forming. One made its way to his brain. The stroke hit hard. Doctors tried everything, but Bill slipped away quietly, surrounded by family. He was only 61. His death sent shockwaves through the industry. James Cameron, who directed him in Titanic and Aliens, called him one of the most genuine souls to ever work in Hollywood. His family later filed a wrongful death lawsuit claiming medical negligence, not for revenge, but to make sure no other family suffers the same silent tragedy. Bill had survived everything on screen, but in real life, it was a quiet, invisible complication in a hospital room that brought the curtain down. Christopher Reeve, the strongest man in the room, October 10th, 2004, the world lost its Superman. Christopher Reeve, the man who made us believe a human could fly, died in a quiet New York hospital room. Not from a villain, not from the fall that changed his life, but from complications after surgery. 9 years earlier, a riding accident had left him paralyzed from the neck down. Most people would have disappeared. He didn't. He became a warrior for science, accessibility, and hope. He endured procedure after procedure. Every breath was work. Every movement was a victory. Still, he kept going. In his final surgery, doctors tried to close a wound and stop a spreading infection. It seemed minor until it wasn't. A sudden bacterial infection triggered sepsis. His already burdened heart gave out. His wife Dana was at his side as doctors tried to revive him. He passed peacefully. He was only 52. The world was devastated because Christopher Reeve wasn't just an actor anymore. He was living proof that courage doesn't need a cape. From his motorized wheelchair, he'd given speeches, directed films, championed stem cell research. He once said, "A hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere despite overwhelming obstacles." And that's exactly who he was. Joan Rivers, the final joke that went too far, August 28, 2014. Joan Rivers walked into a Manhattan clinic for what was supposed to be a routine vocal cord check. Nothing serious. She was 81 but sharp as ever, still doing stand-up shows the night before. But somewhere between laughter and sedation, something went terribly wrong. Doctors performed a laryngoscopy and endoscopy under anesthesia. Her oxygen levels dropped. Nobody noticed until it was too late. Her heart stopped. She was rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital. They barely revived her, but the damage was done. Joan had suffered severe brain damage. She never woke up. 7 days later, on September 4th, she was pronounced dead. The world was stunned. The woman who roasted celebrities, broke barriers for female comedians, and never backed down was silenced. Not by age, not by illness, but by a series of fatal medical errors. Investigations followed. The clinic had failed to monitor her properly. An unauthorized biopsy was performed. Lawsuits were filed, reforms were promised. But for those who loved her, the only thing that mattered was this. Joan Rivers, comedy's unstoppable force, died because someone forgot to check the oxygen. She'd always joked about death. "I want my funeral to be a big showbiz affair," she once said. Red carpet, lights, cameras. But there were no punchlines in that recovery room, only echoing silence. Steve McQueen, the king of cool, meets his final race November 7th, 1980. In a modest hospital room in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, the king of cool ran out of time. Steve McQueen, the rebel, the racer, the icon, had crossed the border chasing one last shot at survival. He was battling mesothelioma, a brutal cancer lining his lungs and abdomen. American doctors had refused to operate. They said it was hopeless. But McQueen never accepted no. He found a surgeon in Mexico willing to try. The plan was to remove large tumors from his neck and belly. A high-stakes gamble. Steve knew the odds. He took the risk anyway. The operation was long and intense. Hours later, as anesthesia faded, so did his pulse. His heart stopped at 3:45 a.m. The man who once tore through San Francisco in Bullitt, who escaped Nazi prisons in The Great Escape, was now still. He'd lived like a renegade. He died like one too, on his own terms. His wife Barbara was with him. His final words to her were quiet. He thanked her, and said he was ready. John Ritter, a death that shocked Hollywood. He was laughing. He was rehearsing. He was alive. Then he dropped to the floor. September 11th, 2003. John Ritter collapsed on set. The crew thought he was joking until he turned pale. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital across the street, Providence St. Joseph Medical Center. Doctors thought it was a heart attack. They were wrong. It was an aortic dissection, a rare, deadly tear inside his chest. The diagnosis came too late. By the time they opened him up, his heart had stopped. John Ritter was gone, at just 54 years old. Hollywood froze. He was a household name. Jack Tripper from Three's Company, America's favorite sitcom clown. Now the clown was gone. The laughter turned to disbelief. His wife, Amy Yazbek, stood by his side. Only hours earlier, he was cracking jokes between takes. The media exploded. How did nobody catch it? Why wasn't it diagnosed sooner? An autopsy confirmed the truth. It was a fatal mistake, a misdiagnosis, a delay that cost him everything. Amy filed a lawsuit, not out of revenge, but to warn others. Heather O'Rourke, the child star Hollywood couldn't save, February 1st. 1988, a pale morning in San Diego. 12-year-old Heather O'Rourke, the angelic face of the Poltergeist films, collapsed at home. Her stomach had swelled. Her skin turned gray. Her breathing grew shallow. Her mom called for help. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital. On the way, Heather's heart stopped. They brought her back, but barely. Surgeons rushed her into emergency surgery. They discovered something shocking. Her intestine had ruptured, not from Crohn's disease, as doctors had believed, but from a congenital blockage that had gone undetected for years. They tried to fix the damage, but her small body, already in septic shock, couldn't handle the trauma. Heather suffered another cardiac arrest. She was pronounced dead that same afternoon. Just like that, a light blinked out. The little girl who once whispered, "They're here," was gone. Hollywood reeled. Only a year before, she'd been smiling on talk shows, promoting the next Poltergeist film. Nobody suspected the storm quietly brewing inside her. The autopsy confirmed the misdiagnosis. She didn't have Crohn's at all. She'd been living with a rare birth defect, and nobody had seen it. Farrah Fawcett, beauty in the face of a brutal end, June 25th, 2009. In a quiet Santa Monica, California hospital room, Farrah Fawcett took her final breath. By her side was actor Ryan O'Neal, her partner through the storm. He said she looked radiant. Even at the end, Farrah had once been the face of a decade. That iconic red swimsuit, the feathered blonde hair, a poster that sold millions, a symbol that defined the 70s. But cancer didn't care. In 2006, she was diagnosed with anal cancer, one of the most aggressive and stigmatized forms. She chose to fight it publicly. She traveled to Germany for experimental surgeries, enduring rounds of chemo, radiation, and painful operations that ravaged her immune system. The world watched through Farrah's story, a raw documentary chronicling her battle. No makeup, no script, just the truth. In her final weeks, internal bleeding returned. Doctors performed one last surgery, not to save her, but to ease the pain. Her body was too weak. She slipped away that morning, quietly with courage. Her death was overshadowed. Just hours later, the world learned of Michael Jackson's passing. But to millions, Farrah's exit was the one that truly hurt because she wasn't just a poster. She was strength. She was grace wrapped in grit. James Avery, the voice of wisdom, silenced by a whisper, December 31st, 2013. As the world prepared to celebrate the end of a year, a different kind of silence fell over Hollywood. James Avery, the towering presence best known as Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, passed away at age 68. He'd undergone open heart surgery. At first, everything seemed to have gone as planned. But beneath the calm exterior, his body was losing the fight. A post-surgical infection triggered multiple organ failure. His heart, the one that had carried decades of strength and compassion, finally gave out. His wife Barbara held his hand as he slipped away. To millions, James Avery wasn't just an actor. He was a father figure, a voice of reason, a symbol of unwavering strength and deep tenderness all at once. Will Smith would later call him a second father. 9. Rodney Dangerfield. The last laugh fades to silence, October 5th, 2004. Rodney Dangerfield, the man who built a career out of not getting respect, died with dignity after complications from heart surgery. 2 months earlier, at age 82, he'd undergone a heart valve replacement at UCLA Medical Center. Before the operation, he joked to reporters, "My doctor told me I have a 1 in 100 chance." I said, "Those are the best odds I've ever gotten." Even facing risk, Rodney was still cracking wise. For weeks after surgery, he seemed on the mend. He made nurses laugh, asked for martinis, and whispered punchlines from his hospital bed. But behind the humor, his body was quietly failing. An infection set in. His heart weakened. And that October afternoon, the jokes stopped. He passed peacefully, his wife Joan by his side. The world mourned not just a comedian, but a man who'd turned pain into performance. Rodney didn't find fame until his 40s. Before that, he sold aluminum siding, worked odd jobs, and struggled with depression. But once he hit the stage, everything changed. "I don't get no respect" became his anthem, a catchphrase so universal it became American folklore. 10. Jeff Chandler, Hollywood's warrior who bled in silence, June 17th. 1961, Jeff Chandler, the silver-haired leading man of the 1950s, entered the hospital for routine spinal surgery, a slipped disc. Common, fixable. He never came out alive. Something went wrong during the operation. An artery was accidentally severed. The bleeding was massive. Surgeons scrambled to contain it, performing 2 emergency surgeries in the following days. But Chandler's body, once so commanding on screen, was now fragile and failing. On the 3rd day, he was gone. He was 42 years old. Hollywood was stunned. Chandler wasn't just another matinee idol. He'd been nominated for an Oscar. He played soldiers, cowboys, warriors, roles that required grit, dignity, and restraint. The truth came later. It was a surgical mistake, a tragic oversight during a standard procedure. His death forced hospitals to confront their protocols. Too late for Jeff, but maybe not for others. Eddie Fisher, a golden voice. Silenced by a fall September 22nd, 2010. Eddie Fisher, once the most celebrated voice on American radio, died not with scandal, not with song, but quietly in a UCLA hospital room. He'd slipped and broken his hip. Doctors called it routine surgery. For an 82-year-old man, it was anything but. The procedure itself went well, but in the hours after, his blood pressure dropped, internal bleeding set in, and his body, already worn by years of heart trouble and fragile veins, couldn't fight anymore. His daughter, actress Carrie Fisher, later said the moment was sudden but not unexpected. He'd lived a long, complicated life, and now it was over. But to an older generation, Eddie Fisher wasn't just a man with a headline past. He was a voice. In the 1950s, he was everywhere, crooning, "Oh, my papa," and anytime across American airwaves, adored by millions, rivaling even Sinatra. Jeanette MacDonald, the voice that outlived the heart, January 14th, 1965. In the stillness of a Houston hospital, the silver soprano of Hollywood's golden age went quiet. Jeanette MacDonald, the angelic voice behind Rosemary and Maytime, was rushed into emergency surgery. She'd suffered from chronic heart problems for years. But that day, the pain became unbearable. Her husband, actor Gene Raymond, flew her to one of the nation's top cardiac surgeons. They would attempt to replace her failing mitral valve. It was risky, but Jeanette had never shied away from a spotlight, not even this one. The surgery stretched through the night. The team worked delicately, thread by thread, trying to save her fragile heart. But just before the final sutures were placed, it stopped. They tried to revive her. Nothing. Jeanette MacDonald was gone before the sun rose. She was 61.13. Tony Randall, the gentleman who bowed out quietly May 17th, 2004. Tony Randall, the quintessential neat freak from The Odd Couple, the sharp-tongued wit of Broadway and late-night television, died in New York, far from the laughter he'd gifted the world. He was 84. Months earlier, he'd undergone heart bypass surgery to improve circulation. The operation was successful, but recovery was cruel. Pneumonia set in, a common complication for patients his age. Despite aggressive treatment, his lungs weakened. His heart soon followed. That spring evening, the curtain fell for the last time. There was no applause, just quiet. To millions, Tony Randall would always be Felix, fastidious, neurotic, and delightfully fussy. But off-screen, he was something far rarer, a scholar, a patron of the arts, a man who carried himself with both grace and mischief. Alan Thicke, the TV dad who never made it back home. December 13th, 2016. Alan Thicke, America's beloved TV dad, collapsed on a hockey rink while playing with his teenage son. He joked on the way to the hospital. He was still Alan, charming, light-hearted, larger than life. But hours later he was gone. Doctors determined he'd suffered a rupture of the aorta, a tear so severe that emergency surgery was his only chance. They rushed him into the operating room at Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, the same hospital where John Ritter had died years earlier. The same hospital just across the street from the studios where both men had once made America laugh. Surgeons tried, but the damage was too great. Alan Thicke died during surgery. He was 69. To an entire generation, he was Dr. Jason Seaver, the steady, wise, unshakable father on growing pains. Off-screen, he was just as affable. A composer, a host, a loyal friend, a proud father. His son, singer Robin Thicke, called him the greatest man he'd ever met. Richard Harris, The Last Battle of a Celtic Lion, October 25th, 2002. Richard Harris, the Irish titan of stage and screen, died in London after complications from surgery meant to ease his battle with Hodgkin's lymphoma. He'd checked into University College Hospital for a chest infection. But behind the infection was something far worse. The cancer was advancing. The surgery offered a sliver of hope. It wasn't enough. Though the operation went as planned, his body, weakened by both disease and time, began to fail. Within days, he slipped into unconsciousness. His sons were by his side when he passed. He was 72. For those who knew him only as Professor Dumbledore in the first 2 Harry Potter films, his death came as a shock. To those who'd followed him for decades, it felt like the closing chapter of a grand, defiant epic. They were legends, icons, fathers and rebels, warriors and clowns, dreamers and gods on a silver screen. But in the end, they were only human. Not one of them died in a scene lit for beauty. There were no makeup artists in the operating rooms. No scripts, no second takes, only beeping monitors, white sheets, and the quiet ticking of time running out. Some walked in smiling. Some never woke up, and some knew they weren't walking out again. These 16 stars who lived in the glow of fame died in the cold clinical light of surgery. Not because they were weak, but because even the strongest hearts can fail. They remind us that behind every curtain of fame is a fragile body, a hidden fear, a final act nobody rehearses, and when the stage goes dark, the only thing left is the echo of what they gave us. Laughter, courage, magic. So tonight, remember them not for how they died, but for how they lit up the world before the lights went out.